There are seasons in a woman's life when something sacred begins to stir beneath the surface, quietly, gently, yet undeniably. It does not always arrive with thunder or spectacle. Often it comes as a deep inner knowing, a subtle redirection of the heart, or a discomfort with what once felt normal. If you are a chosen woman, the Holy Spirit's work within you is not meant to inflate ego, but to refine purpose. It is an inward transformation that reshapes how you see yourself, how you love, how you endure, and how you walk through the world. Being chosen does not mean life becomes easier. It means life becomes more meaningful. The Holy Spirit does not simply comfort, you are also corrected, stretched, and awakened. Many women mistake this process for confusion, isolation, or loss, when in truth it is alignment. If you have felt different, set apart, or pulled away from certain people, habits, or patterns, it may be because something holy is being formed within you. Here are 9 signs. The Holy Spirit is working inside you, chosen woman. You feel a deep inner conviction, not condemnation. One of the clearest signs of the Holy Spirit at work is conviction that leads you toward growth, not shame. This kind of conviction does not strike like a weapon. It arrives like a light turning on in a dark room. When you make a mistake, you are not flooded with self-hatred or despair, nor do you feel the urge to hide, numb yourself, or punish yourself emotionally. Instead, there is an inner clarity, sometimes quiet, sometimes uncomfortable, that gently but firmly reveals where alignment was lost. The voice within you does not say you are bad, but rather you are becoming someone who no longer belongs here. This distinction is critical. Condemnation attacks identity. Conviction protects destiny. As this conviction grows stronger, you begin to notice a shift in how you respond to failure. You no longer spiral into cycles of self-judgment or defensiveness. You take responsibility more quickly. You reflect rather than react. There is an internal call toward integrity that exists even when no one else is watching, applauding, or holding you accountable. You start to care less about appearing righteous and more about being aligned. The Holy Spirit sharpens your conscience not to burden you, but to refine you. This inner conviction also changes how you view correction. Instead of perceiving it as rejection, you experience it as guidance. You may feel momentary discomfort, because growth always stretches us, but beneath it is peace, not panic. You understand, even if only intuitively, that correction is evidence of care. The Spirit convicts those who are being prepared, not those who are being abandoned. This awareness creates emotional stability. You no longer collapse when you fall short. You rise faster because you understand that failure is not the end of your becoming, but part of its shaping. Over time, this conviction develops discernment within you. You learn to recognize when something feels off internally, even if it looks acceptable externally. You stop negotiating with behaviors that dilute your character. Integrity becomes less about moral performance and more about inner congruence. Your thoughts, actions, and values beginning to align. This is not driven by fear of punishment, but by respect for who you are becoming. Conviction, when it is holy, does not break you down. It builds you up into someone stronger, clearer, and more anchored in truth. 2. You are being drawn into solitude. You may notice an increasing need for quiet, reflection, and separation from noise. This shift can feel confusing at first, especially in a world that equates constant engagement with relevance and aliveness. You may wonder why gatherings that once energized you now leave you depleted, or why endless conversations and digital stimulation suddenly feel heavy. But this is not loneliness, it is consecration. The Holy Spirit often draws chosen women into seasons of solitude, not to isolate them from life, but to reintroduce them to their inner world without interference. In solitude, distractions fall away, and with them, the external voices that once drowned out your own. You begin to hear yourself think again. Silence becomes a mirror, revealing both unresolved wounds and dormant wisdom. This can be uncomfortable because solitude removes the escape routes. No performance, no noise, no constant affirmation. Yet within this quiet, something sacred happens. Your intuition sharpens. Your prayers become less scripted and more honest. Your awareness deepens. You are no longer reacting to life. You are listening to it. This pull toward solitude is not a rejection of people, but a realignment of energy. You become more selective about where you place your attention because you recognize how influential your environment is to your spirit. The Holy Spirit uses stillness to recalibrate you, to restore sensitivity where overstimulation has dulled it. In silence, you begin to recognize patterns, emotional habits, relational cycles, inner narratives that were invisible when life was loud. You gain insight not through striving, but through stillness. Over time, solitude becomes nourishing rather than empty. You stop filling every quiet moment out of discomfort. You learn to sit with your thoughts without judgment, allowing clarity to rise naturally. This is where spiritual strength is quietly built, not in public victories but in private alignment. You may not emerge from solitude with instant answers, but you emerge with steadiness, with depth, with an inner rootedness that cannot be shaken by chaos. The Holy Spirit speaks most clearly when the world grows quiet, and you are learning to recognize that silence is not absence. It is presence. 3. Old desires no longer satisfy you. Things that once excited you, attention, validation, chaos, shallow pleasure, begin to feel empty, even exhausting. This shift can feel unsettling because these desires may have once provided identity, comfort, or a sense of aliveness. You may find yourself trying to return to old habits, only to realize they no longer work the way they used to. The thrill fades quickly, the distraction feels hollow. This is not loss, it is purification. The Holy Spirit reshapes your appetite, not through force, but through dissatisfaction. As your inner world changes, what once fed your ego no longer feeds your soul. You begin to crave peace over drama, depth over surface, and truth over comfort. This doesn't mean temptation disappears, it means indulgence loses its reward. There is an internal awareness that certain patterns no longer align with who you are becoming. You may grieve this shift, because letting go of old desires often feels like letting go of former versions of yourself. Yet beneath the grief is a quiet relief, a sense that you are no longer enslaved to impulses that once controlled you. This realignment often creates a period of restlessness. You may feel bored, unfulfilled, or uncertain, not because something is wrong, but because something new is forming. The Holy Spirit removes what no longer nourishes you before fully revealing what will. This in-between space requires trust. You are learning to sit with emptiness without rushing to fill it, allowing space for something more meaningful to grow. Gradually, new desires emerge, desires rooted in wholeness rather than hunger. You find satisfaction in clarity, in meaningful connection, in inner peace. You begin to value simplicity, not as deprivation but as freedom. This transformation is subtle but profound. Your cravings no longer pull you away from yourself, they guide you deeper into alignment. When old desires lose their grip, it is not because you are becoming less alive. It is because your spirit is being tuned to something truer, steadier, and far more sustaining. 4. You become sensitive to what is spiritually off. You may not always have words for it, but you feel when something is wrong, an environment, a conversation, a relationship. There is an internal signal that alerts you before logic catches up. You sense tension beneath politeness, manipulation beneath charm, emptiness beneath excitement. This heightened sensitivity can feel overwhelming at first, especially if you were once accustomed to ignoring red flags or overriding your intuition to keep the peace. But this is not paranoia. It is spiritual awareness. As the Holy Spirit refines you, your discernment sharpens. You begin to recognize subtle shifts in energy, when something drains you, when motives feel misaligned, when paths quietly diverge from your values. You notice how certain spaces leave you unsettled, while others restore you. This awareness is not meant to make you fearful, but selective. You are learning that not everything you can tolerate is meant to be carried. With this sensitivity comes responsibility. You realize that discernment is not about judging others, but about protecting your inner life. You stop forcing connections that feel heavy. You pause before committing to things that disturb your peace. You trust the quiet no, even when there is no obvious reason to explain it. The Holy Spirit trains you to honor what your soul responds to, even when your mind seeks justification. This awareness also deepens compassion. You see brokenness more clearly, but you no longer feel obligated to absorb it. You understand that empathy does not require self-betrayal. Discernment teaches you where to engage and where to step back. Over time, this sensitivity becomes a form of wisdom, one that guides you gently away from harm and toward alignment. You are not becoming fragile, you are becoming attuned. And an attuned spirit knows when something is not meant to stay. 5. You experience emotional pruning. Tears come more easily, not from weakness, but from release. This is one of the most misunderstood stages of spiritual growth because it looks, from the outside, like regression. Yet emotionally, something far more intentional is happening. Old wounds rise to the surface not to punish you, but to be acknowledged at last. Memories you thought you had moved past resurface. Feelings you buried in order to survive ask to be felt. This emotional pruning is not random, it is precise. The Holy Spirit brings forward only what you are now strong enough to heal. You may find yourself grieving unexpectedly, grieving versions of yourself that lived in survival mode, grieving relationships that once felt essential, grieving dreams that had to die so your spirit could breathe. This grief can feel confusing because nothing new may have happened externally. But internally, layers are shedding. What once protected you has begun to restrict you. Emotional pruning removes attachments that no longer align with your future growth, even if they once kept you safe. This process often feels like breaking before it feels like freedom. You may feel raw, exposed, or tender, yet beneath the discomfort is honesty. You are no longer numbing, bypassing, or pretending you are unaffected. Healing demands presence, and the Spirit invites you into that presence with courage rather than fear. Tears become a form of surrender, a way of releasing emotional residue stored in the body and psyche for years. As this pruning continues, you notice a lightness emerging. Emotional reactions soften. Triggers lose intensity. You respond rather than collapse. The weight you carried unconsciously begins to lift, replaced by clarity and self-compassion. This sacred pruning makes room for new fruit, peace, emotional resilience, and grounded joy. Healing does not mean forgetting. It means no longer being ruled by what once hurt you. Through this process, you are not being diminished, you are being refined. 6. You are becoming uncomfortable with inauthenticity. You can no longer pretend, perform, or shrink to fit spaces that dishonor your truth. What once felt manageable, small lies, forced smiles, social masks, now feels physically and emotionally heavy. Your nervous system reacts when you are not being honest with yourself or others. This discomfort is not rebellion, it is alignment. The Holy Spirit works through authenticity, and as a chosen woman, you are being called into integrity between your inner world and outer expression. You begin to notice how exhausting it is to maintain versions of yourself that are palatable but not real. Conversations that revolve around appearances feel hollow. Roles that require you to suppress your values feel suffocating. You realize that peace cannot coexist with pretense. As a result, you become more selective with your words, your commitments, and your presence. You speak less but with more intention. You show up fewer places but more fully. This shift can create friction. Some people may misunderstand your withdrawal or mislabel your boundaries as distance or pride. But you would rather be misunderstood than dishonest. You are no longer willing to betray your inner truth for the sake of comfort or belonging. The Spirit strengthens you to stand alone if necessary, knowing that alignment matters more than approval. Over time, this authenticity brings freedom. You feel lighter because you are no longer divided. Your yes means yes, and your no carries peace. Relationships rooted in performance naturally fall away, while those grounded in truth deepen. Spiritual maturity is marked not by perfection, but by congruence. When who you are aligns with how you live, authenticity becomes not just a value, but a form of spiritual power. You feel a strong pull toward purpose, not popularity. Your focus begins to shift from being liked to being led. Approval slowly loses its grip on your decisions. You notice that praise no longer energizes you the way alignment does. The Holy Spirit redirects your attention inward, then forward, toward meaning rather than validation. You begin to feel a quiet but persistent responsibility to live intentionally, to use your experiences, wisdom, and voice in ways that serve something beyond personal comfort. This pull toward purpose does not always arrive with clarity. Often it begins as restlessness. You sense that you are meant for more, but not in a loud or grandiose way. The desire is not for attention, but for impact. You start asking different questions. Not do they like me, but does this matter? Not is this impressive, but is this aligned? These questions reshape your priorities. Popularity thrives on external reinforcement. Purpose grows in silence. You may feel unseen during this transition, but you are not stagnant. The Spirit works quietly, reshaping your values, strengthening your resolve, and preparing you internally before revealing anything externally. You learn patience because purpose unfolds over time, not on demand. Even without full understanding of your calling, you feel guided. Choices become clearer. Distractions lose appeal. You feel drawn toward growth, service, and depth. This shift marks a turning point, from living for applause to living for meaning. And in this quiet devotion to purpose, you discover a fulfillment that popularity could never sustain. Your compassion deepens, but so do your boundaries. You love more deeply, but you also protect your peace more fiercely. This balance is holy. The Holy Spirit teaches chosen women that compassion without boundaries leads to depletion, resentment, and burnout. You learn that love does not require self-erasure. You can care without carrying. You can support without sacrificing your well-being. Your empathy sharpens, you feel others' pain more clearly, but you no longer absorb it as your responsibility to fix. You recognize the difference between connection and enmeshment. Helping no longer means rescuing. Giving no longer means draining yourself. This wisdom allows you to remain open-hearted without becoming overwhelmed. Setting boundaries may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you were conditioned to equate love with self-sacrifice. But as you practice honoring your limits, you notice increased emotional stability. You show up more present, more genuine, and less resentful. Your no becomes an act of self-respect, not rejection. This balanced compassion reflects spiritual maturity. You are not hardening, you are stabilizing. You understand that healthy boundaries preserve love rather than diminish it. Through this clarity, your relationships become cleaner, more respectful, and more sustainable. You love from fullness, not obligation. 9. You trust divine timing more than human control. Perhaps the most profound sign: you are learning to surrender. Not passivity, but trust. You still plan, work, and show up, but you no longer panic when outcomes are delayed. The urgency that once drove you softens. You understand that growth unfolds in seasons, not schedules. You begin to sense that delays are not denials, and that unseen work is happening even when nothing appears to be moving. This trust calms your nervous system. You stop forcing doors that resist you. You stop chasing timelines rooted in fear. Instead, you listen, adjust, and remain present. The Holy Spirit anchors you in patience, not because waiting is easy, but because it is meaningful. You learn that what is meant for you cannot miss you. Control loosens its grip, replaced by faith and alignment. This surrender brings peace, not stagnation. You move forward with steadiness rather than anxiety. In trusting divine timing, you gain freedom. You no longer measure your worth by speed or comparison. You rest in the knowing that your life is unfolding with intention, and in that surrender, you find strength, the quiet confidence of someone who knows that their path is being guided, even in the waiting. If this message reached you at a moment when your heart needed clarity, confirmation, or comfort, it is not by accident. The Holy Spirit often speaks through timing, not volume. This is the Woman of Light channel. If you feel led, subscribe to stay connected to messages meant to strengthen and awaken chosen women walking this path. And if you know, deep in your spirit, that you received this message at exactly the right time, type 11 in the comment section as a declaration of alignment and divine blessing. Stay faithful to the work happening within you. You are being shaped for something sacred. Thank you for watching.